Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. On today's podcast, we are going to be talking about how to view discipline with a proper perspective within your relationship.
But of course, before we do that, if you're enjoying this content, please hit the like button. And as always, please hit the subscribe button because every time you do, it makes me smile.
And if you are enjoying this content and you want to get bonus content while also supporting what we do here and helping us continue to do it, the best place to do that is over on Patreon. So a link to our Patreon is down below.
So Ari, I gotta say I'm a little embarrassed a little bit because in this podcast because we've been doing this for a little while, but what we're talking about today is kind of a little bit of a failing in my area, I think, but we felt like we wanted to share this, obviously, because it will really help some people out there, I think, especially the head of households who may be struggling because this was kind of a big blunder on my part, I think.
I thought that we were kind of on the same page with this, to be honest. But we definitely did have two very different perspectives, and that kind of collided. Last week.
Sure did.
And so we obviously worked through that, and we'll talk more about that process in this podcast. But really it came down to how do we view the role of discipline in our relationship, and how should we view the role of discipline in our relationship? And
really where that miscommunication started is, I gotta be honest, I don't even remember what this was over now at this point.
I do.
And okay, you wanna share?
So I was just having a very emotional day. I was having a hard time regulating, and I did not feel like I could use the phrase, "Can I have a correction?" just because our daughter was in and out of the room. I didn't want her to overhear anything. And so I told you that I was overwhelmed. And instead of offering correction or leaning into our discipline system to help me with that, which is something that we've done for a while, you kind of wanted me to work through it on my own.
You kind of seeing the theme here, and it's now I'm like, oh, it's all coming back to me now. And so what happened is I did not realize, I mean, this was almost a subconscious thing. And then it came to the conscious mind, if you will, through this process, where I was like, oh, my mind automatically went to, well, let me see if she can work it out on her own before I offer correction or say, we need to have a correction. And so we got into this, I don't want to say argument, because if it would have been an argument, it definitely would have been something that I believe I would have followed through with a punishment. But it did turn into this big miscommunication. That's a really good, a word. And really, that's when I had this aha moment where I was like, wow, I am still not as often as I should be, although I'm better. I am not doing as often as I should be knowing that correction is always on the table. I mean, it's there for a reason as the first resort, but I'm not using it in the right way. I'm not using it as the tool that's there. I'm still kind of saying, well, let me check these other boxes first and then go there. And so this was a moment where we felt like we really wanted to share, and I guess this is a good place to start to say that should be the first resort. That is your first tool that you grab for. You don't check these other boxes and say, well, maybe she can work through these or she can go through this process first. No, the first thing I should have done is when she said, I'm overwhelmed, I should have said, great, I'll be right back. I want to make sure that our daughter is settled, and then we will do a correction. And that's exactly where I should have gone.
I think that what it really came down to is as we've gone through this process and as we've grown, I have really embraced this idea of spanking being kind of the result of just needing regulation or the result of behavior. And I feel like subconsciously, again, it wasn't a conscious thought on your part, but you were looking at spanking as the last resort.
Yes. Right.
In our relationship.
Yeah.
And to an extent, that was creating some tension because it was making it to where anytime that you impose spanking, it was becoming this like really catastrophic event
Right.
between us.
That's a good word, catastrophic, you just used.
And it was creating a lot of tension. It was creating a lot of disconnection. It was creating a lot of negative responses from both of us that didn't need to be there. And so that is really the crux of this miscommunication is I'm like, I thought that I could just have correction in order to resolve these feelings of overwhelm. And now you're telling me that you don't want me to lean into that system. Just became this big miscommunication between us to where at the end of it, you realize that you were looking at spanking as a last resort when really it should be a first line of defense in how we function and how we do things.
And it wasn't until we just started talking about this right now that I also realized, I think subconsciously as well, I haven't gotten rid of all of that laziness that we had talked about. I think part of the reason that I wanted you to maybe go through some steps is because it was, towards the later part of the evening, for us, we would consider the later part of the evening. And I think subconsciously, because it wasn't a conscious thing that I made, but I think subconsciously it was like, I just don't want to deal with it. And so the good thing that came out of all of this, it was, no, this needs to be the first resort. And then it's retraining the mind, because here's what it really comes down to. Your mind is going to tell you, and this is what just occurred to me, it was the light bulb just went on. Your mind is going to tell you, oh, you're too tired, you don't want to do this. But what you don't realize is if I would have just taken care of that in that moment, it actually would have been faster and more effective than what wound up happening.
Yes, it definitely would have. And again, we got our wires crossed, and I started to feel very, I guess, unstable in our relationship, because I felt like I had an understanding of what I could expect and what I could count on, and then it felt like that was being stripped away. And we had to reestablish what the foundation of our relationship is. And what it really comes down to is that you want to lean into these systems because they are good systems, because they work, because they build up our relationship. And by not leaning into those systems, by trying to, oh, she needs time to work it out, she needs space, she needs this or whatever, it becomes a point of contention between us. And that only grows. It doesn't get better. Now, is there a time and place where maybe I might need some time and space to try to work through some things? Sure. But that's few and far between. That is not the norm, and that's not necessarily something that should be expected.
And again, we've talked a lot about on this podcast, a lot of our journey and our successes, but we felt like it was really important for you to also hear some of the times where we have some failures and different things. And so that the biggest principle, the biggest takeaway that I want to first say to head of households is really take an evaluation. Use what we're telling you, because what I did here is I then took an inventory of my mind to say, hey, this is what needs to come out of this is you need to quickly, consciously, so that you can reprogram the subconscious to say, this is always the first resort. This is the first thing that you always lean into. Even if she doesn't come to you and ask for a correction, if she says the words overwhelmed or you sense that tension, you guys know what I'm talking about. That tension that happens, there's just something off. You can tell there's something going on with your taking in hand and you, where there's a severing of the connection in some way. Just go right to whatever it is that you need to do. And it may not be correction. It may be extended correction. It may be punishment. But go right to that. Don't do what I did and go, well, let me see if she can self-regulate. So no, the whole point you're in this dynamic is because she can't. She needs you to help regulate her.
This week on the Patreon side, on the bonus content, I've talking a lot about submission, and I'm talking a lot about like the mindset to have as a taken in hand. But part of those videos that I have created for that is this idea of being dependent or interdependent with your head of household. It is a good thing to depend on your head of household for that regulation. It is a good thing to look to them for stability and for guidance and leadership. And this is an extension of that dependence or interdependence with your head of household. I think that, you know, one thing that we really kind of got our wires crossed on was, what is the role of the dynamic that we're creating? And really, should I have a level of independence within the relationship to have to do things for myself and on my own? And I don't think so.
Right. We kind of came to that answer that no, I should be helping you with that a lot more.
That's not something that we want in our relationship. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that I can't do anything on my own, but as far as like, you know, the dynamic between us and looking to Coda for leadership and guidance, that's not something that I should be anticipating his decisions. I should be asking. That's not something that I should be trying to figure out on my own. He should be giving that direction. And this is just kind of an extension of that. I shouldn't have to try to regulate and cope on my own when he is here to help me, and I can look to him for that help.
You know, one of the things that we've talked a lot about on this podcast, and I thought, oh, I should have listened to my own advice, and it's exactly what you're just talking about, which is our job is to unburden our taken in hand. And by having a little bit of this idea, even a little bit of, well, let's see if she can self-regulate herself, that's not unburdening her, that's actually burdening her. And so what I realized is that from the outside looking in, someone might say, well, my gosh, I mean, the moment she can't emotionally regulate, or the moment she has something happen, you're just going to take care of business. I mean, how does that help her? It actually helps her a lot, because what it communicates is that, look, I care enough about you that I don't want you to be burdened by these emotions. So we're just going to go ahead and take care of this through a correction so that I can take on those burdens for you, and you can let that go, and we can keep our relationship intact before this huge divide happens.
And it does, believe it or not, create the ability for me to maintain my regulation, maintain my moods long term. It might seem counterproductive that if I am looking to an external kind of system in order to regulate, that I wouldn't be able to learn to self-regulate ever. But actually it does teach me how to maintain my moods over time, because when we first started using correction for regulation, I mean, I was asking, or you were imposing correction, I would say 5 to 6 times a week.
Yeah, I was gonna say almost on a daily basis. Yeah.
And now I would say it happens maybe once a week.
Yeah.
Maybe twice a week.
Maybe twice, but that would really be an extreme end, I would think.
And so it does actually create good outcomes long term. It does, lessen over time. This isn't something that I feel like is going to be something that I really require on a weekly or even, multiple times a week basis forever. And I think that that's really, kind of the fear that you were having.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what was kind of getting in your subconscious, was like, is this going to be something that we have to do forever?
I didn't think about that till now, but I think you're right.
To a certain extent, spanking is something that we're going to
yes,
do forever.
Right, do forever.
But it should shift and change over time. Like, you shouldn't be spanking me for the same exact thing.
Sure.
But spanking is here to stay in our relationship.
The other thing is, you were just talking that I think this does, if you're paying attention and you follow through with correction and being aware of when she needs that and following through with that immediately is, I really think it has, when you said it not only has lessened because you've been able to regulate a little better, but also what I think it does is it gets rid of some of those emotional bad habits that we're all in. And what I mean by that is I think you would say that there are some things that you used to think and used to do that were constant thought patterns that are slowly dissipating or have gone away totally.
Absolutely. I think that we all have that little inner voice that isn't always the most productive. And as we have gone through this process, as I have become more secure in my relationship, that inner voice has quieted.
That's good.
And so that's definitely a benefit of leaning into spanking, leaning into these systems, making sure that this part of our relationship is really intact.
Absolutely. And so head of households, hear what she just said. She just said that by doing that and by having that consistency and having that understanding that, hey, if I can't regulate, we're automatically going to go to this, that has helped her grow. You have grown as a person, not just as a wife and a mom and all these other things, but as a person, to where those things that used to just torture you emotionally, and I think that's a good word to use, torture you emotionally, they're not doing that anymore. And you're feeling more at peace. You're feeling more, and I've seen this in you. I've seen things that used to stress you out not have that happen anymore. They don't stress you out like they used to.
That is very, very true. And I think that just shifting our mindset to the concept that discipline doesn't end with a spanking.
Right.
That's not where discipline ends. That's where it actually begins.
Good point.
And because when you spank me, there is this point where you kind of talk me through why.
Yes.
Because it's really important for me to be able to focus on the why while it's happening. But it's the after. That's where like the guidance happens. That's where the instruction happens. That's where you encourage me to do better.
Right.
But you also talk me through, what does doing better look like?
Right.
And that is the discipline.
Yes.
That is when, because spanking isn't just a consequence.
Right.
It's an opportunity to learn how to do better. And it's that like right after when I consider it an extension of the lecture.
Right. Yes.
Where the tone definitely shifts. The discipline has happened. You're no longer being stern. So the tone has shifted, but you are very direct and you're very directive.
Right.
In how you're speaking to me to kind of like teach me.
Right.
How to avoid being punished again, if it's a punishment, or how to regulate, how to approach that situation to where maybe I don't need the correction for regulation next time. Maybe I can self-regulate because I don't get to the point of being overwhelmed.
Right. Right.
But if I do get to the point of overwhelm, that is not the point where you can teach me anything.
That's true. That's right.
When I have gotten to overwhelm, I need that correction to regulate.
Right.
And then you can talk me through how to approach the situation.
And one of the things I do that after whatever spanking that we've had, and you're usually very good about saying that you're sorry, I will ask you directly, what are you sorry about? Because that gets you to think about, okay, why did we just do what we did? So that you can go, oh, okay, next time I should do X. And that's very, very important. Like you were saying, that's part of the I think like extending the lecture was a really good thing to say. I think that's exactly what it is.
And so all that to say, I think that what we learned this week in our own relationship is that we need to lean into the systems we've created, not shy away from them, not try to avoid them.
Not treat them as a last resort like I did.
We really just need to lean in, look at them as how we function as a couple. And one thing that really came out of this was Coda said that he was kind of concerned that I was going to have that in my subconscious, that he didn't want to do this, that he looked at it as a last resort because of how he approached this situation. And I understand that fear of his, because as a head of household, you have to be so steady, you have to be so consistent. And when you show a lack of consistency, when you show kind of a crack in the foundation,
or you make this mistake,
or you make a mistake, because mistakes are going to happen, because our head of households are human, it's really important as a head of household not to let that get into your subconscious, and not to feel like you have to be perfect, or if you make a mistake, then things are just going to fall apart. Because if you felt that way, if you got that into your subconscious, then you're more likely to continue to make mistakes, which is only going to perpetuate the problem. And I reassured Coda to say, the more consistent you are, the less likely I am to feel that way. Like, I can't get rid of the kind of the subconscious fear that I have that this is how you feel. But if you show me through your actions and through your follow through that that's not the case, then I'm not going to feel that way. And I feel like we have completely gotten over that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I know that you are consistent and that you are leaning into our systems. And I think that that is a really good thing. Like, that's what we need for our relationship.
Like you're saying, it was just a little bit of a blip. It was that the good thing that I started looking at it that came out of this was maybe the last remnants of something that had been lingering, and now we've killed that. And so now I feel like, okay, that was the last remnants of kind of some of my old self, my old habits and things. We've killed that. We've gotten back on track. And but again, I felt like this was important that we shared this with you, because it's important to not only share the victories but the failures, so that no matter if you're starting out or you've been doing this for a while, there's still room for improvement, and still lean into those principles that we were just talking about. But the most important thing is to, in fact, learn from them and not use an excuse and go backwards. Go forwards and learn from that situation and try to improve on it.
And I think it's really important for us to share these processes so that you know that this is part of the process.
That's right. Yeah.
If you are going along in your relationship, things are going really, really well, and then you have something come up, you have a miscommunication, you have a mistake on either side, that is not a sign of failure. That is not a sign to give up on your relationship. That's not a sign that this just isn't working. It is part of the process, and sometimes you just have to work through these things.
That's right.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be kind of extending this conversation for our members only post show. So if you want to get access to that post show, you can do so through YouTube membership or on Patreon. Links to all that is down below if you're interested in hearing the extension of this conversation. Otherwise, we will talk to you guys next time.
See you later.